I was focused on coming to California when I was like 9 years old.
When Tombstone hit theaters in December 1993, it quickly became one of the most beloved modern westerns. Fans were hooked by its mix of action, unforgettable one-liners, and a cast full of big names like Kurt Russell, Val Kilmer, Bill Paxton, and Sam Elliott. For many, the movie was simply a fun but gritty retelling of the famous Wyatt Earp story. Yet behind the camera, the journey of making Tombstone was anything but smooth. In fact, the film nearly collapsed during production due to conflicts, firings, and creative struggles. Most people never realized how chaotic things were behind the scenes, nor how close the project came to failure. Over the years, stories began to surface about who really saved the movie, who got sidelined, and which version of the story was almost lost forever. Recently, Sam Elliott himself revealed a personal truth about his time on set, one that changes the way fans understand his performance as Virgil Earp. While most people remember the flashier roles like Val Kilmer's Doc Holliday or Kurt Russell's intense Wyatt, Elliott explained that his character was meant to be the heart of the story, a moral compass in the middle of chaos. But much of that depth never made it into the final cut. His quiet confession, along with other cast memories, uncovers a hidden side of Tombstone that makes fans see the film in a new light. The story of how this classic came to life is just as dramatic as anything that happened on screen. The story of Tombstone begins with writer Kevin Jarre, who had an ambitious dream of making the ultimate Western. He not only wrote the script, but also insisted on directing it himself. Jarre's vision was bold and detailed. He wanted to capture the town of Tombstone as a living, breathing world, not just a backdrop for shootouts. He pushed for authentic sets, costumes, and even insisted that all the actors grow real mustaches. He designed scenes with sweeping wide shots, reminiscent of older westerns from the 1950s and 60s. On paper, his plan sounded impressive. But once filming started in Arizona in 1993, problems appeared quickly. Jarre was a first-time director, and the scale of the movie overwhelmed him. Instead of dynamic close-ups and fast-paced action, he preferred long, slow shots that frustrated the crew. Cinematographer William Fraker tried to guide him toward a more modern style, but Jarre resisted. As a result, the production fell behind schedule almost immediately. Even Sam Elliott, who greatly admired Jarre's writing, began to worry. He saw the tension rising on set, with actors confused about direction and crew members frustrated with delays. After about a month of filming, the producers had no choice but to step in. They dismissed Jarre from the project, a heartbreaking decision since he had created the story and brought the team together. For Elliot and the rest of the cast, losing Jarre felt like losing the captain of a ship. They respected him deeply, but they also knew the film could not survive under his approach. This painful turning point forced everyone to adapt quickly if they wanted the project to continue. With Jarre gone, the studio brought in George P. Cosmatos as the new director. But Cosmatos had very little time to prepare and wasn't familiar with all of Jarre's detailed plans. This left the cast feeling uneasy, as the movie still lacked clear direction. It was at this point that Kurt Russell, who played Wyatt Earp, stepped quietly into a leadership role behind the scenes. Though he never asked for official credit, Russell began rewriting parts of the script, cutting nearly 30 pages of dialogue and subplots to streamline the story. Each night, he worked on shot lists and handed them to Cosmatos the next morning, essentially guiding how the film would be shot. Val Kilmer, who played Doc Holliday, later confirmed how much Russell sacrificed during this period, even saying that he slept on Russell's couch so they could plan scenes late into the night. This level of dedication turned Russell into the unofficial director of Tombstone. Sam Elliott supported Russell's leadership, even though it meant his own role was reduced. Originally, Virgil Earp had more emotional depth and more time on screen, showing his life with his family and his struggles as the responsible brother. But when the script was trimmed, many of those moments were cut out. Elliott admitted later that if he had known so much of Virgil's story would be removed, he might not have taken the role. Still, he stayed because he believed in the project and in the people making it. Even though his character lost screen time, Elliott remained dedicated, sneaking small moments back into his performance whenever possible. These quiet acts kept Virgil from fading completely into the background. One of the little-known stories behind Tombstone is the rivalry between this movie and another Western being made at the exact same time, Wyatt Earp, starring Kevin Costner. Hollywood had a strange habit in the 1990s of producing two films about the same subject almost simultaneously, and the tale of Wyatt Earp was no exception. Costner's project was larger in scale, backed by Warner Brothers, and marketed as the more serious, epic take on the lawman's life. Meanwhile, Tombstone seemed like the scrappier underdog, shorter, flashier, and more focused on entertainment than historical detail. What most people don't realize is that Costner actively tried to stop Tombstone from being widely released. He reportedly pressured studios not to distribute the movie, fearing it would overshadow his own 3-hour epic. Despite these efforts, Tombstone pushed forward and actually reached theaters first. This timing gave it an advantage. Audiences already had their fill of Wyatt Earp's story by the time Costner's version arrived months later. Critics also compared the two and found Costner's films slow and self-indulgent, while Tombstone was tight, exciting, and rewatchable. Sam Elliott later admitted that the competition between the films added extra pressure to the cast. They knew they had to deliver something memorable to survive in Costner's shadow. Elliott also confessed that he admired Costner's acting but felt Wyatt Earp was too much, too long, and too slow for most audiences. In the end, Tombstone became the clear fan favorite, not only outshining Costner's film, but also securing a lasting place in pop culture. While the movie is remembered mostly for Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday, Sam Elliott often stressed that the real emotional backbone of Tombstone was the relationship between the three Earp brothers, Wyatt, Virgil, and Morgan. The film shows them as a tight-knit family trying to build a peaceful life in Tombstone, only to be pulled into violence by the infamous outlaw gang known as the Cowboys. Elliott revealed in later interviews that many quiet family moments were filmed, but later cut from the final version to make more room for action and pacing. One scene showed Virgil comforting his wife after she worried about the family's safety. Another showed the three brothers sharing a moment of laughter before tragedy struck. Elliott believed these moments gave depth to the story, showing that the Earps weren't just lawmen. They were husbands, brothers, and fathers trying to hold on to normalcy. Losing these scenes, he said, took away part of Virgil's humanity. Still, the bond between the brothers remains one of the strongest elements in the film. Bill Paxton's Morgan Earp brought innocence and optimism. Kurt Russell's Wyatt carried intensity and determination, while Elliott's Virgil gave maturity and steadiness. Elliott described Virgil as the one trying to do the right thing, no matter how hard it was. That moral compass, he explained, reflected his own personality in real life. Fans may remember the gunfights and famous lines, but the brotherly bond is what gives the movie its heart, and Elliott's performance was key to making that work. Filming Tombstone was not an easy task. Beyond the director change and script rewrites, the cast and crew endured long days under harsh Arizona weather. Dust storms would sometimes sweep across the set, forcing everyone to stop filming. The actors wore heavy wool costumes, complete with vests, hats, and thick coats, even in blistering heat. Sam Elliott recalled that the mustaches, which Jarre had demanded be grown naturally, were another challenge. They itched constantly, trapped sweat, and made eating a difficult task. Elliott joked years later that those mustaches were as much a character in the film as any of us. But beyond the physical discomfort, the emotional toll was even greater. With so many script changes, actors often didn't know what scene they'd be filming next. They had to adapt quickly, memorizing new lines or altering their delivery on the spot. Elliott said this chaotic style worked for some actors, like Val Kilmer, who thrived on improvisation, but was harder for those who preferred structure. Despite the difficulties, Elliott admired the resilience of the cast. They leaned on each other, often sharing meals and conversations late at night after grueling days. Those bonds off camera translated into the strong chemistry audiences see on screen. Looking back, Elliott admitted that the hardship gave the movie a rawness it might have lacked otherwise. "We were uncomfortable, frustrated, and sometimes downright miserable," he said. "But that energy, you can feel it in the movie. It's real." No conversation about Tombstone is complete without mentioning Val Kilmer's unforgettable performance as Doc Holliday. While Sam Elliott and Kurt Russell brought gravitas and steadiness, Kilmer injected charm, danger, and tragedy into the story. His portrayal is now considered one of the greatest performances in modern Western cinema. Elliott himself praised Kilmer's dedication, recalling how the actor stayed in character even off-camera. Kilmer reportedly carried a handkerchief to cough into during breaks, maintaining the image of a man dying from tuberculosis. He studied old Southern accents to perfect Holliday's unique drawl, and practiced card tricks until he could perform them flawlessly during takes. Elliott admitted that Kilmer stole the show, but he said it without bitterness. Instead, he admired Kilmer's fearlessness and commitment. At the same time, Elliott revealed that Kilmer's performance was even better, thanks to the strong cast around him. "Val was brilliant, no doubt about it," Elliott said, "but it worked because Kurt was there to anchor him, and because the rest of us played it straight." In other words, the balance of personalities made the film shine. Elliot also shared that Kilmer's health scare years later, when he battled throat cancer, reminded him of how fragile life is. He said rewatching Tombstone after Kilmer's illness felt different. It was no longer just acting. It was almost prophetic. Although Virgil is not the loudest or flashiest character in Tombstone, Sam Elliott has often explained that he valued the role deeply because of what it represented. Virgil was the oldest Earp brother, the one who believed most in the law, in duty, and in moral responsibility. Unlike Wyatt, who often wavered between wanting peace and seeking revenge, Virgil stood firm in his beliefs. Elliot said he connected to that sense of responsibility because it mirrored how he lived his own life. Even when much of Virgil's story was cut, Elliot worked hard to show his quiet strength in subtle ways, through posture, tone of voice, and the way he looked at other characters. He wanted audiences to feel that Virgil was the backbone of the family, even if he wasn't always the center of attention. Over time, fans began to appreciate that performance more. At conventions and fan events, Elliot said people would often tell him that Virgil was their favorite Earp brother. Some even said they wished the movie had given him more screen time. Elliot's response was always humble. "That's the thing about movies," he said. "You never know what's going to stay in the final cut. But if people still remember Virgil, then I guess I did something right." In recent years, as Tombstone has been celebrated as a cult classic, Sam Elliott has finally opened up about his personal feelings regarding the film. He admitted that he sometimes felt disappointed that Virgil's deeper storyline was trimmed away, but he also accepted that the final product worked beautifully. "Movies aren't about one person," he said. "They're about the whole, and this one worked because everyone brought their best, even when things were falling apart." He also revealed that what mattered most to him was not the fame or recognition, but the friendships he gained from the project. Elliot remained close with Kurt Russell for years and spoke warmly about his time with Bill Paxton, who passed away in 2017. "We were brothers on screen, and in some ways, we were brothers off it too," he reflected. As for the fans, Elliot has said he never expected Tombstone to become such a cultural phenomenon. He thought it would be another Western that came and went, not one that people would still quote and re-watch decades later. To him, the movie's lasting impact proves that sometimes, even the most chaotic productions can produce timeless art. His honesty about the struggles behind the scenes makes the story of Tombstone even more fascinating, reminding us that the best movies often come from the hardest battles. When Tombstone hit theaters in December 1993, it quickly became one of the most beloved modern westerns. Fans were hooked by its mix of action, unforgettable one-liners, and a cast full of big names like Kurt Russell, Val Kilmer, Bill Paxton, and Sam Elliott. For many, the movie was simply a fun but gritty retelling of the famous Wyatt Earp story. Yet behind the camera, the journey of making Tombstone was anything but smooth. In fact, the film nearly collapsed during production due to conflicts, firings, and creative struggles. Most people never realized how chaotic things were behind the scenes, nor how close the project came to failure. Over the years, stories began to surface about who really saved the movie, who got sidelined, and which version of the story was almost lost forever. Recently, Sam Elliott himself revealed a personal truth about his time on set, one that changes the way fans understand his performance as Virgil Earp. While most people remember the flashier roles like Val Kilmer's Doc Holliday or Kurt Russell's intense Wyatt, Elliott explained that his character was meant to be the heart of the story, a moral compass in the middle of chaos. But much of that depth never made it into the final cut. His quiet confession, along with other cast memories, uncovers a hidden side of Tombstone that makes fans see the film in a new light. The story of how this classic came to life is just as dramatic as anything that happened on screen. The story of Tombstone begins with writer Kevin Jarre, who had an ambitious dream of making the ultimate Western. He not only wrote the script,